Shout out to Snowball, our incredible new sponsor, a private community where top entrepreneur investors share private deal flow, wins, tough lessons, strategies, get advice, and so much more. Check out www.snowballclub.com. Let's grow together with Snowball. Hello, and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Anthony Lawson. We are going to talk about buying businesses and buying real estate related businesses. You specialize in something that I don't think anybody else have had on the show does. You do all kinds of real estate related businesses. So I'm looking forward to this conversation and learning a lot from you today, Anthony. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for inviting me. Greatly appreciate it. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, so it's probably the first time I've ever had anybody do an interview right from their car, but the sound quality is good and stuff. So let's just get this going, man.
Uh,
Tell us about you, man. How did you get started? What got you interested in? I know you started in the real estate world. I have a background in real estate myself, but kind of what got you into the idea of mergers and acquisitions and buying businesses and buying cash flowing assets?
yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. And then first, before I start off, I want to say I do apologize to all the viewers. I was just doing a little bit running around today. It's from the vehicle. So, but the business, it all started from because my first property, now that I look back, way before I had a real estate fund and all that good stuff, I bought my first one. So it takes from you to actually get over the hump of can I do it to actually start, right? So you got to start. Then when I started, I served in the military. I got out of the army. And as I was transitioning out of the military, bought the first property. And I thought I was just wanted to house a single family or maybe do some type of Airbnb or model like that. But it also stems from when I was in my home state of New Jersey. And I came into like they call it nowadays, panhandling, but a gentleman at the light, and he was asking for some change. And I started speaking to him. He actually was a homeless veteran. So I was speaking to him and I gave him some money and told him what to do. He served the tour in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I said, I wonder if I could create a business model that's also impactful, but also cash flows at the same time. So that first one, I had like an aha moment where I turned that into veteran housing. So I took the basement, like I fixed up the basement. I took the basement for myself because I utilized it using the first time home buyer program. So you actually got to live in the property. So I took the basement and I rented out the top as veteran housing. And that's all I did. Then I started to realize there was a huge need for it because a lot of people on the lower income side, they have income, but just can't afford high rents. Just like New Jersey, New York, California, certain areas are very, very high rent. So, and I realized that, and a lot of people don't know that they can actually get those extra assistance from the VA, or they too intimidated to go inside the VA and ask for the assistance. So I started realizing that, and I started outsourcing the actual work of getting the extra help to like nonprofits, different things like that. It started making it a big ecosystem to where if I can house people that needs the help, I can get them driver's license. I can get them workforce housing, different things like that by utilizing my contacts to a nonprofit. So that's how I got started.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I'm a veteran too, so thank you for serving. So anybody out there, I'll take a second and just say anybody out there that's having difficulty getting help, go to your VSO, go to your veteran service organizations and stuff. There are people that will help you get back on your feet. They'll help you get your benefits, get your disabilities squared away. But you got to be willing to fight for these benefits. Nobody gives them to you equally, or sorry, not equally, but easily. I'm a disabled vet, and I know a bunch of other people, and we're still fighting You still got to go in there and re-up your claims and change things, and I've been out for 20 something years. So, veterans housing, that's interesting in the fact that, the veteran housing is where you got your start. So, in that situation, what led to I know you do some other stuff too, you could do a lot of things in that, senior housing and other stuff. What was your next step in there? What happened after the veteran housing?
Yeah, so after the veteran housing, I started noticing a need for sober living, as we call it nowadays. Back then, I was just going to rehabilitation centers, seeing who needed the extra help. And then I was getting them part-time jobs so they got back on their feet through the same ecosystem, through the nonprofits, the caseworkers, and different things like that. And then from there, I started housing. So I was doing two tour room this time. So I said, it must be a thing to this. Instead of doing one person tour room, let's do two tour. So I started out doing that. And then I started out pitching landlords what I was doing. And I was low on capital when I first started. So I started getting very, very creative. Yeah, I started doing rev sharing. I started doing, a lease options, a whole lot of lease options and option agreements. So just started getting real flexible. And then as I built my cash reserves, and I actually taught myself how to actually buy the group home facilities, the license component of it, because that's the key to actually scale. And group home, people that may not know what a group home is, just pretty much congregate living, people that need a daily assistance every day. So sort of like assisted living, and people who are familiar with nursing home. That's another form of a group home. But then you have other group homes like mental illness. You have behavioral health homes. You have developmental disability, intellectual disability, different things like that. So that's the kind of facilities I started targeting and started purchasing.
It's interesting, my mom, before she passed away, she's been gone for 20 years now, 15, 20 years now. But, before that, she worked at one of those places. She was a care provider at some of the assisting living. She did a little everything. I have a very eclectic, mother. She did everything from making control panels for nuclear-powered submarines, where the electrical control panels were big copper bars that weighed like 30, 40 pounds, to working assisted living, mentally handicapped assisted living facilities. So I wanna dive into this just a little bit, even though we're a show about mergers and acquisitions. There's a reason why you do veterans and assisted living. The cash flow on that and the opportunity it opened up for you tends to be much higher than the standard rental properties, right?
Yes, that is correct. So the reason, not only getting from the impactful side, but from a business standpoint, it makes absolute sense. And then a lot of landlords want to maximize. So I kind of teach them how to maximize a long-term rental and actually turn it into a business and real estate. So you get the best of both worlds. So to your point, you can do M&A, you can do some roll-ups with assisted living. You can essentially 5x the income as you would on a long-term rental by just adding the business component to it.
Yeah, I was looking at some of that. When I chose to go into this, we were looking at it's like we looked at apartment complex investing, but in the Midwest where I was, it's fairly competitive. And uh I'd owned part of the RIA, the Real Estate Investment Association at the time, and I'd owned a coaching business of my own and teaching people how to do real estate. And a lot of the people I taught, I convinced them to move up, right, to commercial, to do apartments and stuff. And I started thinking, well, if that's my next move, because I was doing a lot of residential, I thought, if that's the next move, now I got to go compete with all my friends that I taught them to move up. I'm very competitive. I'm very, very active in the marketing. So I was like, I don't know if there's enough of these go around if I start flooding the market with the type of advertising I would do. And so I chose this as something else. Mainly, the opportunity is just as big or bigger. Cash flows right, but I still like that niche of or niche or how do you say the word of assisted living, group homes, that type of stuff. The cash benefits or the cash flow benefits of assisted living per room, per bed being higher than your standard rental rates and stuff. The reason I wanted to bring that up is you actually created a fund, and a lot of funds are equity based and that type of stuff. Your fund, as we were talking before the show and previous conversations, is slightly different. Tell me about creating the fund, how you have it structured, and then we can explain why you didn't have to go the equity route because you have enough cash flow to support a debt route, which is really incredibly interesting. So we were talking about, the cash benefits or the cash flow benefits of assisted living per room, per bed being higher than your standard rental rates and stuff. The reason I wanted to bring that up is you actually created a fund, and a lot of funds are equity based and that type of stuff. Your fund, as we were talking before the show and in previous conversations. It's slightly different. Tell me about creating the fund, how you have it structured, and then we can explain why you didn't have to go the equity route because you have enough cash flow to support a debt route, which is really incredibly interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So to your point, I actually started off studying private equity for about a good 2 years before I opened up my fund. Luckily for me, my whole theory is you pay someone in life to go further. So I have a really good mentor. He's very big in the commercial real estate space, and he has two funds and been operating them since the market crashed in '07. So I was talking to him about it, and then he's like, "Let me tell you and explain to you what my fund is. It's a debt fund." So I said, "Debt fund? What is exactly? What is that? It's like hard money?" He said, "It is. It is, but it's not because a debt fund is hard money lending too. If that's what you want to gear towards as a arbitrage as far as the points, but as far as how we're structured and set up, it's essentially you raise the capital. There's different tiers in the capital that comes in that an investor can partake in, and it's a fixed return. It's cross collateralized once you deploy the capital in the fund, right? So if you buy, let's say you're taking $1 million, you buy 10 assets, their money is cross collateralized via promissory notes against the 10 assets, which is good because now it's a more of a safety feature or benefit to the consumer that's coming in or the investor that's coming into your fund, which is pretty good. So now the fund actually gives off this cash flow, right, from the assets, and then you're covering the interest payment for the investor that came into the fund. So the way we're structured is we do the payouts February 28th and August 31st, which is two payouts twice a year. You don't want to stress yourself out and do quarterly or monthly. So for us, then it's a good buffer to still look for deals. You don't have to kind of rush into it as people usually do in 1031s. They rush into deals because they're time constrained. So it allows you to go out there, buy the assets. And the way I pitch in real investors in, I don't have acquisition fees. I don't have management fees and I don't have disposition fees. Why is that? It's because I want investors to know we're strictly performance based as a fund manager, that I'm putting your capital to use as if it's my own capital. And I actually have my own capital inside the deals as well, too, inside the fund. So it gives a security for the investor that's coming in that says, okay, well, this person has some skin in the game that actually shows that, okay, they don't want to, not necessarily want to, but they're fouled to not have fees up front. Long as my money come back first, then they make money. It's a true win-win. So that's how we structure. I reel in a lot of capital through that way. And then I've been blessed to actually go the debt way because people don't realize too, once the properties are sold, or even if they're not sold, they're refinanced and the investors want their capital back for whatever reason that happens, life happens, and they give them their capital back. You still own the asset. So you have no partners. So that's the beautiful part about having a debt fund.
It's interesting. So you have different tiers, and we're because the SEC has guidelines and stuff. We don't want to get you in trouble, so we won't say what you pay out per tier and stuff. But you do have
Yep.
different tiers, and you're able to pay out. And you told me privately, um, decent, really reasonably good payouts for most investors would be, they'd hard to beat it in anything, right? It's comparable to other market assets and higher
Yep.
than most. So I know there's SEC regulations about announcing payout rates and stuff, so that we don't want to get any trouble there. That said, I think one of the reasons you can handle that is if you were just doing straight real estate or like even just straight like hotels and stuff, a bad economy could actually cause, or a bad like COVID happened, it would cause you to have a hard time paying the structures. The reason I think that it's easy to do the debt structure out and pay your semi-annual payments is assisted living facilities and those group homes are incredibly profitable. All right.
Oh yeah.
I was looking at the assisted living facilities, and one of the things, like if you put memory care on top of an assisted living facility for elder care, you're talking, $6,000 to $10,000 a bed on some of these private higher end facilities. I know because we've had
Yes.
family members in them, right? And it can get outrageously high. Now you got
Yeah.
overhead. If you got memory care, you've got doctors and other stuff you got to pay out of that and other stuff,
Yep.
or you got a support structure, but you're not going to get that per room or per bed. I know people when I was looking into it, I met people who were building fourplexes that had 4 bedrooms, 4 baths, right?
Yep.
Or 4 bedrooms, 4.5 baths. So they had a bath for the caretaker, somebody that was doing that. So, and they were doing double occupancy in each one of the rooms. So they had 8 people stay in a 4 bedroom house,
Yep.
and it had a living room, a kitchen, just like anything else. The kitchen was a little bit bigger than most because the caretaker cooks for everybody. And
Yep.
then it had a half bath where the caretaker could go to the bathroom, and it was all handicapped accessible and stuff. So it was a little bit. They were building these things, so they would
Yep.
just go and build fourplexes and turn them into higher end assisted living facilities. One of the guy was building them right off a lake, so they had lake views. Right, they all had their own little
Mhm.
balconies. I seen some of them, and I was like, "Why?" I asked him, I said, "Why does the balcony have it's ground level. Why do you have a guardrail on the balcony?" He says,
Yeah.
"Because they don't want the guests rolling down to the river or anything. A lot of the guests will be either in wheelchairs or whatever, so they can go out and be on their balcony, but they're not supposed to go past the gate." Right?
So
Describe, like, do you buy real estate and then turn it into these type of facilities, or do you buy the facilities themselves that
that's
are
a
up and running?
very good question. And usually I come across a lot of owner operators prefer to acquire the real estate, put the
Mhm.
license there, and then owner operate it. Now I tell people there's nothing wrong with that, but it's how fast do you want to go in life, and how far do you want to scale? Now the reason why I say that because I scale through acquisition. That's where the M&A comes in. I have a good team of cold callers. We source deals throughout the country. Now we're entering 4 states of all these different facilities. And the good thing about that, we're in no time like no other because of the baby boomers are retiring. Now, a lot of these baby boomers have owned and operated their facility for 20 plus years, right? And they don't actually realize that they can sell the business with the real estate. So what's happening in the market right now is people are shutting down the facility as the last resort once they displace the residents at other facilities. And let's say your behavior home, mental illness or developmental disability, they tend to shift them all to other facilities. And if the facilities are full, they go to homeless shelters, right? So they look at the homeless shelters. Let's say all the homeless shelters are full because they typically get full pretty quick. Now, if they are all full and they shut down the license, of course they cry and everything else, but the residents go back on the street. They go homeless without the proper help that they need, without the proper care. So that's why I come and actually educate the seller and say, listen, I'm a qualified buyer that buys these kind of facilities. I know what it takes to actually run them. I care about what I'm doing because I started off with the veteran housing. So that's sort of my pitch. I tell everybody have a unique pitch that works good for them. But that's my pitch. That's how I started. I love helping people. And why not help people? And you can help yourself in return to build generational wealth and legacy for your family. So that's where the acquisition, comes into play. So now I prefer to scale through acquisitions because now, number one, the cash flow is there. You can analyze the deal relatively quickly through the profit and loss statement, the tax returns, and everything like that that's needed to actually analyze the deal. Now, as mom and pop, they may not be organized, so it's a little bit more due diligence as on the buyer side, but that's okay. That's all about business itself. You have to kind of read through the numbers and see what works and what don't work, and that's what we do, man. So I teach people how to scale through acquisition, how to transform your life through one facility, because one facility on a low side can net you around $10,000 a month. Now, if you're on the behavioral health home side of it, or the mental illness, developmental disability, I also get government contracts. So I know how to get the contracts. So now these contracts can net you anywhere of 30, 40, 50,000 per home. So it's a big difference. So that's what we do. And that's what I teach people.
So the contracts from what? Are
Yep.
you
From the
like
federal government.
for the
Yep.
federal
So,
government? Oh, wow.
yep. So to talk a little bit more about that. So the federal government have funds allocated for group homes, right?
Mhm.
And facilities and different things like that. Actually, by the way, before I even talk into that, your hometown or not hometown, your state, right? The state of California, your state actually just put in a assisted living waiver to go up to 18,000 per resident. That's a big difference. And how do I know? Because I'm looking at California too. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal for a lot of the owners. Now, as far as the government contracts go, I like to, like as I alluded to, scale through acquisition. So we actually source the ones that's on these contracts. Now, how do I know they're on these contracts? Because they call the providers. So usually the state usually have some sort of list online or something like that. It's usually public record. You just got to usually dig around a little bit. And you contact who's ever in charge of that department. You ask them for the list, the provider list. You simply cold call them. That's what we do. We download the list of all thousands of these facilities and we just cold call them. Now, let's say you get that one or two that says, yes, I want to sell, then it's great. Now you figure out if they're on sam.gov. That's the government website. You have to verify the cage number and a unique identifier number. That's the two numbers that you need for that contract. Now, if that's the case, I usually acquire them through stock settlement. Usually, if you're in the M&A space, people like asset purchases more, which I 100% agree with. But if you're on the government contract side, stock settlement is where you want to be because you can shift the things over. And the good thing about these facilities is when you acquire them, you can even have verbiage in your contract that saying if it's any back taxes that's owed, the sellers have to take care of it, different things like that. And you have to remain in good standing with the government to move forward regardless anyway. So it's typically they're not going to be behind on taxes. They're not going to be dodging the IRS or anything insane like that. But that's what we do, man. We get the contracts, and then that's the beautiful part about it because which one makes more money? Project based or revenue? So it's usually revenue. Anybody would like to buy a facility that has a contracted revenue. So that's the ones I actually teach people how to look for as well too, if they are in your home state.
Wow, interesting. The
Yeah.
I know I rent when we had our real estate business, when we started it, we moved to a bigger office pretty quickly. But when we started it, we rented a little space where we kind of shared. It was a it was only one office. My business partner and I, and we just put one desk in there, and he used one side of the desk, and I used the other. Right? It
Yeah.
was like a C-shaped. It was like an L-shaped desk, and I used one side of the L, and he sat like he was a guest. He sat on the other side of the L. And that was our office when we started. We
Yeah.
rented that space from a lady who she was a heavyset black woman who was a Nigerian or so. Everybody said she was mean, but I think it
That's,
was just a cult. She like they like. I used to go sit and talk with her. I didn't think she was mean.
yeah.
I love fussy old people anyway. My grandmother was that way, so I love people who are just bold and fussy and older. The older when they get to the point where they just say anything that's on their mind. But
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by business. I always have. It's kind of why this podcast works. I'm just intrigued by how
Yeah.
business works. And she owned, I want to say more than a dozen. I think it was like 14 or 15 of the
Mhm.
assisted living facilities, like the ones my mom used to work for. And
Yeah.
when I first started asking questioners, she's like, "Get out of my office. Quit asking me so many questions. Pay your rent." But every time I went and paid rent, I could have just sent it to her. She had like a electronic thing. I could drop it, in her account, or I could actually pay the rent in her Dropbox. But I waited until she wasn't busy. I kind of knew her schedule, and I would just
Yep.
go sit in there and I take her. I figured out what her favorite coffee was, and I'd take her coffee sometimes, and I would just go sit with her because I was trying to understand that business because they drove $140,000 Mercedes, like Defenders and stuff. Back then, now they're
Yeah.
like $180,000, $200,000. They drove some nice cars. And I think, what is this? What are they doing that I'm not doing here? But they did the assisted living for the mentally handicapped adults.
Yeah.
I want to say they had more than a dozen. I think it was 13 or 14 of these 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom houses. And they managed all the caretakers and did all the stuff and all the contracts out of the office where we were. But it's an intriguing business model and that
Yeah.
you're taking care of people, you're providing a service to the community that somebody has to take care of, and it's way more lucrative than a lot of people think they are.
Yes.
We actually, in our real estate business for a long time, we actually had a really big house, like, I wanna say it was 30 it wasn't big, but had 3,400 square feet, had, 5 standard bedrooms, but there was a dining room that the people would turn into a bedroom and a big, huge second living room that it had its own bathroom. It used to be a 3-car garage. It was converted, already had hardwood floors on it. They turned that into bedrooms. So it ended up being like a 6 or 7 bedroom, and we'd usually rent it out by room to, canvassing, salespeople, right?
Mhm.
It had a swimming pool in the backyard, which precluded us from turning it into some of the type of group homes because of the safety issue. But we usually found canvassing groups, and we'd get 2 or 3 times the going rate for rent just because more wear and tear having that many adults living in a single place. But that said, and we did a few extra things because we knew we had that many adults living there, like we had 3 refrigerators in there and, some other stuff just to make sure had 2 sets of washers and dryers because the laundry room was big. Let's talk about what's the process a person goes through to create a fund like that? I kinda know it, but for the audience, if you're thinking about doing this, let's do the fund first, and
Okay.
then I'll let you choose. Let's talk about somebody wants to get involved in buying assisted living or group homes or
Mhm.
veterans homes. I'm a veteran, you're a veteran. That does still interest me in some extent.
Yep.
So, either let's start with the group home, veteran home things, and how does somebody get kinda where do they start to learn this stuff? Or we
Yep.
can talk about learning how to kick off your own fund. Which way would you like to go?
Yeah. Let's talk about the group home first. 'Cause I
Okay.
think, if someone is interested, they like the business model, they get good at it, then they want to scale, then they can have it fun. So we can kind of keep it flowing. So it's an interesting thing because it's an untapped market for it. Now, a group home, when you can niche down into what you want to do. For example, we talked about assisted living. That's just one avenue of it. Let's say you just wanted to do strictly assisted living. I can run through like three scenarios. So we'll talk about assisted living, we'll talk about like the VA, and we'll talk about sober living, for instance. So if this, let's say you wanted to do assisted living, your target demographic, it starts with there. Who is the target demographic? Your target demographic would be seniors, right? Or baby boomers that's aging in retirement, or people that's on Alzheimer's. They have some type of cognitive disorder and on dementia, something of that effect. Now, you can get started one of two ways, similar that we talked about earlier in the podcast. You can start from the ground up. You can have a house, and I don't mean a development, but a house that you just want to convert. That's what I mean by ground up. So you can do that in a quick, synopsis. Once you acquire the real estate, you'll go to the state website and go to zoning first before the state website to make sure that it's actually zoned for to be a assisted living facility. Let's say, yes, it can be. It's always an interesting thing because you have to apply through the state website, but then you also have to kind of contact the city as well too, or the fire department to make sure that you install your sprinkler systems, your fire suppression system, different things like that. So it's always a kind of back and forth thing, contacting the state and then the city, so you can make sure you're following their guidelines. So that's the quick synopsis on that, because it's just literally listening to what they say and then submitting the right paperwork and documentation. Now, as far as the side through acquisition for facilities, usually the list is pretty public record that people don't really realize. So you can contact whoever's running the state license for that department. Is usually Department of Human Services for most states. You can
Hmm.
see who's running the licensure for that department. You call them or send them an email once you get their email online and ask them, can you get a list of all the facilities in this particular county or the whole state if you want to do that? They'll send you the list and then you just cold call them.
Hey there, Hot Exit family. Today I'm thrilled to talk about Snowball, our incredible new sponsor. This community is more than just an investment hub. It's a place where growth is holistic. A private community where top entrepreneur investors share private deal flow, wins, tough lessons, strategies, get advice, and so much more. Snowball is a network rich with like-minded, experienced entrepreneurial minds, including investors, founders, CEOs, and doers, all dedicated to meaningful growth. Snowball threads are like a daily masterclass. This isn't just about financial success. It's about enriching your entire life. If you're looking for a community that supports your entire entrepreneurial journey with shared wisdom and collective support, check out www.snowballclub.com. I believe their approach to compounded growth in wealth, health, network, and relationships could be the game changer you've been seeking. Let's grow together with Snowball. I would say I love what we just finished explaining the process of buying a property and turning it into assisted living or whatever. Well, I would suggest if you're here in California, you go the second half of your story there was, which is where you say you find a list and you cold call them and find them. Getting things through zoning and coding and building permits here is an absolute nightmare. I've talked to because I did real estate before I moved here. I thought about doing something like that when I got here. And one of the things, especially like in our county, where it's a lot of nature preserves and a lot of like redwood trees that are protected and just all kinds of weird stuff going on, it can take upwards to a year and $100,000 to get a permit to build and get it pushed through the process. It's insane. So, if you and then you've got we live in a state of Karens. I'm trying to be nice here, and everybody wants to be in your business, and nobody wants you to do anything that they're not doing. The second you go to a public hearing and say you're going to put 8 adults in a 4-bedroom house, you're going to have everybody in your business telling you that's not fair. They should, that's too much. And I would say buy something that exists here. It's already up and running. Slide under the radar, take ownership of it, and keep everybody else out of your business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then to touch bases on it, because I explained the assisted living.
Yep.
Now, I also said the viewers, I'll talk about the veterans and the sober living. right? Sort of same thing. So if you wanted to go sort of unlicensed to do the veteran housing, you can simply contact your departments, veteran affairs.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I will always say, make sure the property is in good proximity of good transportation, because usually the veterans would not be able to drive. Usually, probably would be some type of SSI as well to be a disability. So always by bus line, train line, light rails, or anything like that is always very helpful. And they can send you over referrals because people don't realize in these hospitals, regular hospitals, not just the VA, they actually have caseworkers and case management. That's all they do is find people housing. So you need to find out who is the point of contact for the housing sector and then get really cool with them and get them some coffee and everything too, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And they will
Yeah.
send you referrals. They need you just as much as you need them. I would get really cool with that. And I will also add in there too that there are organizations that work directly under the VA. So I'm gonna use my home state of New Jersey. You have like Volunteers of America. That's a very big one that gives back to the VA and different things like that. And they do tremendous work in the community. Then you have the New Jersey Development, not development, I'm sorry, New Jersey Disability of America. That's one of them. Then you have New Jersey Veteran Affairs, but that's not the VA. That's actually an organization. So you have all of these sub organizations that work strictly only with the VA for veterans. And they get them housing, they get them benefits, they get them, to go through the HUD-VASH program, which is one program that don't necessarily do multiple people in a room. They're coming around to it from the emails that I've been seeing, but it's typically like a Section 8 in a way, the HUD-VASH program. And that's how you start your VA housing. And that's what I did. I went through organizations. These organizations referred me people, and I just kept it going. And then the last one that we said we talk about is the sober living. So they're all group homes. Now the sober living component of it, which is pretty cool because if you can attach another service to it, which is called the intensive outpatient program, IOP, that's like an on-site rehab clinic that making sure that they become sober and everything like that. That component pays extremely well. It's typically anywhere between 1,500 to 3,000 for every couple hours per resident, right? So they're not Medicaid or anything like that. Medicaid is just one component, but they have like these different network of insurances, different things like that. So it's a really good component. And then the sober living component of it is people that you can target for rehabilitation centers. You can target them from AA meetings where they usually have AU meetings or weekly or biweekly meetings to remain sober. They have programs called the 12 step. The 12 step program is like the 12 steps that they hold each other accountable in all these different groups. And then I will also even throw in there churches. Churches are really good for rehabilitation too, because people want to get on their feet where they usually go to church. You build some type of connection through there. And all these resources are actually things that I have done that have worked for me. And I know I've done because people that's in my program, they do the same thing. They have worked as well too. So no matter where you're at in the country, only thing that changes is the name of the organization. So that you have to really understand in your area.
Yeah, California has CalVet, which is the California Veterans Help, and then there's VSO offers. Almost every county has a veteran service organization offices and CalVet offices. A lot of times they're in the same building, so you have all the there's a building here in our county for disabled veterans and everything. They get you bus passes and transportation, and I didn't know if they did housing, but they apparently probably do. So interesting. Now, does that pay as well as, like, assisted living facilities, where does the pay scale if you were looking to maximize a piece of property, kinda where does it fall? Is it if you had to rank them in, I guess, rent per bed, what would be the rank?
That is a very good question. The question I get all the time. So I will rank them not in chronological order, but my top three is always developmental disability, IDD, and assisted living. Veteran affairs is very good too, but they're anywhere I typically see them, especially if it's the license directly through the VA. It's anywhere between 1,500 to around 3,000, which is not bad at all. It's not bad per bed. So that's not bad at all. But the reason why I say the IDD, DD, and assisted living, because the IDD and the DD component, you can actually get the government contracts for and mental illness. So they all kind of ties into each other, the mental illness component. In those contracts, I seen it go as high as 10 to 15,000 per resident. per resident.
Wow.
And I know this because I just got the contract awarded in the city of Detroit, state of Michigan. And the highest resident we have there is 12,500. And we have some that's on we call them one-on-ones for pre-placement. So the government is telling you, hey, we need to house these people for long term, but we have no short-term solution. So we have a contract. Well, they have a contract there, the county contract, we call it, to house them pre-placements temporarily. And when you house them temporarily, especially the ones with extreme mental illness, they usually call the one-on-ones. Now, the one-on-one clients in Detroit is $581 a day. 581 times 30, that's $17,430. If you are licensed for 14 residents, you can do the math. That's typically the range. And then, of course, assisted living can range anywhere from the lowest I've seen is about 3,500. The highest I've seen when it comes to all time is around 10,000, maybe even 12, depending on if it's a high upper scale assisted living. But they all very good income, and that's just per resident. So if you have a big box facility, some people stray away from the big box, but I like both the small homes and the big box as well too, as long as the numbers work. Those big boxes can bring you significant amounts per month, and that's net profits I'm talking about, not just revenue. So that's my chronological order.
Interesting. So we've talked about assisted living, group homes, memory care facilities, big box, small box. Let's say we've got a few of them now. Now we're looking to expand. We're looking to acquire multiple. What is the process that you would recommend to set up a fund? I know how to set up syndications and some other stuff. I know what technically required, but what would be the logical steps you tell somebody to, and who would you ask them to reach out and get help from?
Absolutely. So that's a very good question. I would also advise people to make sure you have a business plan first, right? To niche down, know what you're doing, because the second step of that is finding a good SEC lawyer or SEC attorney. Now, I can tell you now, these attorneys will not sway you or even give some type of insight of what you should do. They're going to ask you, okay, you want to start a fund? Not a problem. What do you want to do? Reg D, 506C or B? And if you don't have a clue of which one it is, they're not going to help you. So let's start with that. So Reg D, exemption offering, is you're not a public company, you're a private company. So you have the Reg D offering, right? Regulation D. Then you have something called the 506C, which is for accredited investors only. And you can publicly solicit, meaning you can do advertisements, you can post on social media, different things like that. And by the way, Obama actually came out with that act in 2009. He cared, everything like that. He actually rolled out the 506C, which is one of the best things he ever, have done while he was in office, which is pretty cool. So it's good to actually note that, he did that significant change for a lot of people. Now you have the Reg D 506B, which is for friends and family and accredited investors only as well too. I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, you can take in about, I think it's 39 unaccredited, something like that. The numbers could change.
I know there's a limit to them.
Yep. There's a certain cap to. And now the thing about the 506B is you cannot publicly solicit. In per the SEC's definition, I don't know how they define it, but per the SEC, you have to know the person, even if they're unaccredited. Accredited is different. You don't have to necessarily know. But the unaccredited, they want at least 30 days of actual, hey, I know this person. This is where I met them from, whether y'all went on 2-3 lunch meetings or something like that. As long as they know you, not someone that just attended your program and want to give you money. That's it. So
I heard it was
3 points of contacts in 30 days. Yes, sir. So that's the inside scoop on that. And it's up to you of how much money you actually want to put down as your raise target. Oh, I'm sorry. You brought up one good point that before we talked about it was the syndication. So the point of a syndication, just so the viewers may not know, a syndication is not a fund. A syndication, you're just simply you're going through the same process, but you're raising the capital for one specific deal. That's it. Once the capital is brought in and you deploy it in that project, you're done. It shuts down. If you want to do another one, you have to do the same process all over again. Just so the viewers may know, because the next component is how much is the cost. It ranges on how complex your PPM, that's called the private placement memorandum. It's what you will file along with other documentations to actually raise the capital. It really ranges anywhere. I see it as low as 15,000. That's like being very modest. You already know what you're doing. There's nothing complex. All the way up to 125, 150,000. That's just for the document for you to start. So, make sure you have some liquidity on hand, or if you come in with a partner, how you ever make that work between you and your partner. But that's essentially how you operate a fund. And then you have the other component of it, which we can break it even further down. You have the debt fund, which I'm doing. You have the private equity funds. You have Reg 8 Plus, and then you have crowdfund. Now, I tell everyone, personally, I will always go for debt because it's the easiest way to do it. At the end of the year, once an investor gets their money back on interest, you just simply give them a 1099. You're done. That's it. Now, with PE, private equity, it can be a little bit complex because you have different splits. You have 2 and 20s, you different things like that, meaning they get to 2% and then 20% on the back end. Then you have K1s for taxes at the end of the year. So it can be a little bit more complex. Now, the Reg 8 Plus is where it gets extremely complex because they usually want to see some type of history of performance. The SEC I'm talking about. Now, they usually want to know every transaction you ever done, especially if it's real estate. So it's good to be organized from the start, have all your HUDs in one place. So you want to see all of that. Profits, if you lost money, if you made money. And it's usually a certain cap. I believe it's 50 million to raise a Reg 8 Plus. I don't want to say the wrong information, but it's usually capped at a certain number. And crowdfunding, everyone knows what that is. People put a lot of people together with a little bit of money. They pull it in together and deploy it. Personally, it's up to you. Everybody should read their own disclaimers of how to run it. But it's a lot of work with crowdfunding. And it's a lot of smaller investors that you're pulling together to take down a larger project, which means their accounting and taxes at the end of the year can be very complex. So I will make sure do whatever offering is best for you.
Yeah, if you're going to do one of the crowdfunding, best to stick with one of the platforms too, just because they handle a lot of that. The one you did, isn't there a cap on that too? Is it like 5 million raised, or there's a max number you can raise per fund?
Yeah, it's a certain number that you could do. So my fund is 100. So debt funds can go pretty high, but you want to start off where I always say, like my mentor told me, start off at a attainable number. Right. It's good to say I want to raise because the fund is not the syndication that we spoke about. So I'm open for 11 years. Then I have the option to either extend the fund or close down the fund. Of course, I'm going to extend, but that's just how the fund is operating. Now, it's always good to have attainable numbers because when you're raising, it's good to say, yes, I'm raising 100 million. It seems like a lot to some people, but it's very small fund compared to the other fund. Very small. And having 100 million down on paper is much more achievable than to saying, yeah, I'm raising $1 billion fund, especially if you didn't, necessarily were in the space. It could be more complex because people will say, okay, you're raising $1 billion. Who's your team? Have you done this before? So it's a lot more to that versus $100 million fund. You can have 1 or 2 family offices or high net worth people to achieve that kind of goal to just bring in 20, 25 million or something like that.
Did you cold call? I mean, I'm thinking about it. If you go out there and you've got a business plan where I'm creating group homes, veterans homes, and homes for disabled, either veterans or disabled adults, right? And you got those disability checks coming in from everything. I think you could actually go to some of the pension funds like the firefighters and stuff. But you've got some social credit there to say, hey, invest with us. We pay a good rate of return, and we're helping people do X. It's good PR for them. Did you call like the local firefighters association and see if they wanted to invest some of their pension fund in it? I mean, how did you go about raising the money? I know some of it's friends and family. It always is. You always let your friends share the ride because they want to be in and you're confident in what you're doing. But for some of the bigger tickets, did you cold call family offices or how did you go about it?
Yeah, I actually cold call, and not only cold call. Cold call is one part of it. Cold call is a little bit tough when you're raising a lot of money.
Right,
I
right.
typically go to those events and build relationships, and then there's a lot of referrals. I'm even though it's social media too, because I raised about 2 million on social media. So I'm
That,
very
that
actively engaged, and that's just strictly through Instagram. So I post a lot about what I'm doing. People get engaged. Then you get a lot of the 150, the 350s, the hundreds, $100,000, and different things like that. And then you just have to weed them out and then get on the phone with them to see if they're accredited. Now, to answer your first part of your question, I did not go to fire departments or anything like that. Not yet. Only because they usually have what's called a gatekeeper. Now, the gatekeeper is usually the allocator for that particular pension fund or anything like that. They are very hard to get a hold of to actually have a meeting. So I'm actually in the process of that for California.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have a good contact, and we're supposed to have a meeting towards the end of March for a pension fund for California. They have to allocate at least 50 million for California. So hopefully that goes well. I can bring that in from California, and then we can take it from there. But yes, I haven't done things like that. But when you start talking about larger ticket writers and different things like that, they can cut a large check, usually take a lot more report building. So if people wanted to start off, because I actually started off not through the family offices and everything, but I started off through doctors and dentists. They already accredited with the amount of money they make a year. Usually they can cut 200 to 150, the largest I got from them was around 500,000, a check size. And you get a
Right.
few of
Right.
them, that's the bucks. But then from there, it builds credibility. Hey, have you raised capital? Well, yes, I have, because I raised it from, you don't have to say names, but I raised it from this particular avatar first. Now I'm shifting over to larger check sizes, which is usually the family offices, the endowments, the pension funds, different things like that, institutional capital, which takes a little bit more time to build, but that's what I'm actively doing.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, invest enough, I'll change the name of the facility, put your name on it. Um, yeah, I've seen the syndication deals go pretty well. I already knew it's like, yeah, syndication's one and done. I like the fund way. I always looked at the fund, but I just didn't like the complexity of having all these people with equity in it. And to be honest, I think that the current way that publicly traded companies is extremely flawed in that businesses are constantly proven. You can't just stay stable as a publicly traded company. You constantly have to be growing, growing, growing. And in my mind, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a company that does 10, 20, even $100 million. And it's been that way for the last 50 years, and they've never made 101. Right? And as a publicly traded company, that's almost like a death sentence to the CEO. So there are a lot of times I think they're forced to make questionable decisions, if not bad decisions, because they're forced to grow constantly. And then, I see some of that happening, I think, at the private equity. When you're doing private equity, you're giving people equity, they want to see growth, growth, growth. And a lot of times it's hard to stick holdcos in there. Plus, I don't like the idea of having to acquire something that's doing really well and then having to have a liquidation point. Like, okay, it's a 5 year. We're gonna have to sell this off in 5 years. So, but your equity, I mean, your debt play on that intrigues me greatly, and it's like starts to make me thinking, how could you play that in maybe high cash flow businesses that may or may not be as high cash flow? I don't know what your margins are, but I'd imagine your margins are at least double digits and probably up there along with some of the plus stuff I play in, newsletters and media assets, which I think have the highest margins I've ever seen on anything. 70 to 80% is not unheard of in a newsletter and media assets because it's low maintenance. But, the higher margin options really opens up that equity way way more than anything else would, so
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I usually get a lot of questions around it because people are like, wait, a debt fund. And I always give an example of a hard money lender.
yeah.
People are like, oh, yeah, but I got to explain. I don't take the capital and give loan,
You
you know,
you
because it's a good business model in case somebody wanted to do that, but you're only doing the arbitrage
yeah, yeah,
of the capital as lent at a certain percentage and then hoping you get a higher percentage. With me and the way my mentor have done as well is you're taking that capital and actually deploying it. So to your point, all my deals is doing 20, 25, 30, 40% return. And if my investor is at 12%, which they're happy with, or 10% or 8, whatever the number is, everything else in the middle is actually comes to the fund manager. So that's how that component works, which is pretty cool because it's a win-win all the way around. I make sure that the investors get paid first, and then everything above that comes to the fund manager. And then I also didn't even talk about that. It's only a 1-year hold with me. That's the good thing about it, because imagine PE, typically 5 to 7 year hold, and then your money is capped and locked in. Typically speaking, especially in how the economy is right now, who wants to have their money hold it for 5, 7 years? Which if they put in a fund like mine, you're in it for only 1 year.
Yeah. So you do 1 year term at a 1 year minimum term. They can leave it in or roll it over, right?
Yep, correct. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And then when they roll it over, I actually explain that's better for them because think about it as Andrew Carnegie and everybody else that was wealthy always says it's the compounding effect.
Yeah.
You want to let it compound. When you take it out too early, that's no problem. You still get a good interest, and I give you your principal back, which is the good thing. You get your principal and your interest.
Right.
But if you let it compound, it snowballs.
Do you have people doing that? Because I was curious. Like, I put in $500,000 to your fund, and I don't. This is very hypothetical because I wouldn't put that into anybody right now. Because anyway, I'm trying to buy things on my own. But if somebody puts $500K into your fund and they don't need the semi-annual returns, they don't need the cash flow, they just want it to grow. Do you have the option for them? Just like quarterly, you're supposed to cut them a check for tens of thousands of dollars or whatever the number is for their interest. Can they just compound that in and now they have 550 in the fund? Or do you
Yeah,
pay?
yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yep,
Absolutely. Yes, sir. You can definitely do that. So that's just called a rollover.
Right.
So,
Right.
we tell them your interest is due because we do the payout February 28th and August 31st. The 27th, I'm sending out emails letting everybody know, hey, your payout's going to be tomorrow. Do you want to roll it over? Or do you want me to send it Wire or Zelle, whatever you want to do? And they usually say, okay, roll it over. Okay, great.
You
So
say
now your principal is this, and then your interest is this, and this is the total number.
You keep saying you send things out. I'm assuming you have a team of people, accountants and other stuff to take care of all this. If I did a fund, I'd have at least one CPA oversight and probably somebody backing, double checking him.
The interesting thing though, Ron, I can say this on camera. I don't have a large team when it comes to a debt fund because you don't need one. Only because it's debt. So you know your number plus so I'm gonna give an example. If somebody invested 100,000, if you gave them 10%, that's 10,000. Then you have K1s, and then of course the accountant is on my team, but the accountant is just want to know how much interest was sent out, and then they send out 1099. That's it.
Yeah, and with the equity thing, you're always having to do evaluations, and you can bring on new investors. You try to expand a company, you got to put more. If you have to do a capital infusion, changes your whole cap table, and it can get really complex inside of an equity play, right? To where if you got debt and you decide you wanted to build another room on one of your facilities there, you don't have to go to your investors and go, "Hey, I need to do an infusion here. I'm gonna bring on a second investor." It's still the asset. Their loan is still secured by the asset. They loan what they loan, and you're not diluting their asset any to where in the private equity world, if I bring in another equity investor, I might be diluting the ones that are currently there. All right, looks like we're running about running out of time here. Let's do the wrap up session here. So the favorite question is, if somebody can only remember 2 or 3 things from today's episode, what would you want them to walk away with as key pieces of information?
That's a very good question, Ron. I would say if they had to walk away with key information from today's podcast, it will probably be take action. That's the first thing. And get a really good mentor that can get you there. So that would be my 2 main takeaways because they go hand in hand, right? So when you have a mentor, it's a shortcut to where you want to go. And then you can actually take action from what you learn. And that's going to get you the success that you're looking to achieve.
Like, I love it. Even professional athletes have coaches, so
Absolutely.
don't think you're above it. I'm not above it. I have coaches and mentors and people I reach out to. I do this show. All you guys, including yourself, are one of my mentors. I get little mentoring sessions 1 hour at a time.
Yeah.
It's my cheating life. I do a podcast with interesting people I'd love to learn from, and I get to learn. How do people reach out to you if they
Yep.
want to work with you, want to invest in your fund, or they want to do something with you, or just have a conversation about what you're doing, put you on their podcast, whatever? How would you want people to reach out to you? What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm very active on social media. So if they want to follow me on LinkedIn, it's my first name, Anthony, my last name, Lawson. If they want to follow me on Instagram, very active on there as well. There's Anthony_the investor. And then if they wanted to follow me on Facebook, first and last name, Anthony Lawson. And if they wanted to have some type of interest in the fund, you can go to www.globalinvestmentcapitalgroup.com, all one word. And then I look forward to speaking with them.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your knowledge and your time, and we'll call that a show.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me, Ron. I appreciate it.
Awesome. I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between 5 million and 30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT-enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace. How to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.